UrbanSpaces in the interwar period in Europe is a network of 15 partners from 8 towns in Europe. One of them is Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia. The period spans roughly 20 years between the end of the First World War and the outbreak of the Second World War. The partners study the concept of urban culture and how everyday life is connected with the urban development of their town.
So after the World War I ended, Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. Slovenian territory basically became part of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, later renamed in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Immediately after the First World War, Ljubljana grew as a lot of influxes of refugees from Styria, Carinthia and Italy came into the Ljubljana. At the same time, of course, many refugees went from Ljubljana to other places. So it was a large migration of people. So afterwards, I would say intense pace of industrialization and urbanization of the city of Ljubljana became evident because also new market in the south of Yugoslavia was now offered to Slovenes, which became the most developed region. Social inequalities became even more obvious in the interwar period, as for example new residential quarters were built on the principle of modernistic functionalist architecture, but we can see also other parts of Ljubljana at the moment. So we can see very rich and very poor at the same moment.
I've joined the project because it's a history project. I'm a huge history lover and I also study art history, which is for the time period we are talking about as well really important. But since joining the project, I found new reasons every day while being here. And it is not just because of history or art history, but also because of the people I'm meeting, the new dimensions I'm discovering, and especially the new borders and expectations that are moving while being here and while collaborating in this project.
I hope that people will see that we worked really hard on this project and that they're going to see that there are lots of similarities between these different countries and these different towns. And even if there aren't similarities, that even the differences that we have can connect us in a way as well and make us stronger and also to make foundations to collaborate in the future as well.
Yeah. You know what? We had so many Zoom meetings leading up to our first workshop. It was and the anticipation was growing and growing, and we've met so many amazing people. People that were studying, people that were working in history. We got a full scope of from being interested from a youth perspective in history to actually working with archives and museums. So it was really nice actually to see everyone come together and share their experiences about history and education.
Students and academic staff from the Faculty of Arts at the University of Ljubljana were involved in the majority of activities connected with the project. From organising the workshop in Ljubljana to preparing texts and visual material that served as outlines for video clips, presentations and articles.
Hvala lepa, spoštovani. First in Slovene, then I will speak in English. Welcome to the Faculty of Arts, which is, as already mentioned, the oldest and the largest faculty of the University of Ljubljana. It was established in 1919, which is exactly the time period you will focus on during this workshop. So the establishment of both institutions contributed to the urban character of Ljubljana, although Ljubljana even nowadays remains a small city. To what extent it is also small-minded? Well, that is another question, and I guess there is a multitude of possible answers to this question, and I'm sure this topic will emerge during your discussions over the next 2 days.
some of the scholars of the interwar period also argue that it was in this period a unique culture of fear developed, as there was a lot of critical and inventive intellectuals in Ljubljana, but sometimes they were considered too critical and they were criticized. Also, for example, artists who refused to submit to social and artistic conventions and were searching for ways to express their creativity beyond these conventions were not particularly welcomed. Also, women's suffrage movement was a little bit limited and not so embraced. As an example, essentialist feminist movement became more important, but there were also fears against consumer-based society and individualization.
So the women during World War I played a very big role, and that's why they also wanted to have more rights after the war. Unfortunately, they didn't get the right to vote. However, they did start to break out more in public life, more women associations were founded, also more women newspapers were founded, and there were also many women, or at least some women, that also worked as artists, they also worked as novelists and so on, and even some women were featured in the gallery called Jacopicio Pavilion in Tivoli at that time. So yes, small changes, but were very significant for the later outcome.
So it was time of crisis, especially in the 30s, and there, as in the rest of Europe, also these anti-democratic, anti-capitalist and anti-development ideologies started to emerge. They were all basically anti-modern ideologies. They were radicals on both spectrum, in the far left and on the far right.
Between the two wars, Ljubljana, as well as some other smaller Slovenian towns, preserved the legacy of the Austro-Hungarian architecture. The city had its own great architect, Jože Plečnik, whose heritage left a historical impact in Ljubljana.
Visits to different tourist sites and museums were organized. Crossing the wooded areas around the capital, the international participants visited Prajama Castle. There they were told about the romantic legend of the rebellious 15th century knight Erazem, who resisted the imperial army's siege of the castle for over a year. They visited the Military History Park, which chronicles the various events and wars that have plagued the country since the 20th century.
Inspired by your country, with very good feelings and memories. And I hope we can take this spirit into the project, and all the others of us who will and have to prepare workshops have now the level they have to reach.
I hope that we are going to be able to prepare and to elaborate a result, or it could be a film kit, or it could be a book, or it could be an exhibition that could make people from different publics, from experts, from the broader public, from different also generations, to get the impression of the period. So what was specific and what was interesting in this period that in some places, in some countries, are still perceived as the negative parts or the negative period of their history, and on the other side also are quite forgotten.
Because the project is international, there was an exchange of ideas. The participants quickly familiarized themselves with the nation's history and were able to draw parallels with other towns in different fields, such as politics, culture, economy, and society. The most interesting experience was working with our students, who were enthusiastic about the project and became actively involved. They were a great help and came up with lots of ideas, while also improving ours.
When the youth get to know history, they can also affect their parents, their grandparents, their surroundings. It's not always that the grown-ups should teach the youth. Sometimes the youth can take their own decisions and then they can really influence the world around them. So I think, from my perspective, it's really important that we adults do something for the youth, because they may do something in return to us. And really historical narrative is such a fluid thing that it can be changed easily. And we have to be careful, because the youth might correct us someday.
The workshop is also an opportunity for participants to meet with the local authorities, inform them, and invite them to learn about the ongoing project.
Thank you very much for welcoming us here in the City Hall. On behalf of the whole project and all project participants, we feel very honored to be welcomed here, and we are very happy that we had the chance to start this new project in a personal workshop here in the wonderful city of Ljubljana.
Today at your introduction lecture, things were told about Ljubljana in the historical perspective. Let me give you just a bit of the contemporary Ljubljana.
Also, it's always nice to join European projects because you could exchange ideas, you could compare the approaches, you could see new places, and of course you can meet new and especially interesting and nice people.
L'Europe se construit par un travail en commun. C'est-à-dire que ça n'est pas quelque chose comme ça de mythique, quelque chose qu'on ne peut pas toucher. Là, directement, on est en rapport avec des personnes et c'est ça qui est intéressant, c'est surtout la rencontre.
Honestly, I'm deeply convinced that's the only way we can produce something like a European society, only from the bottom up, never from the top down. You require citizens working together, sitting together, discussing together, or maybe eating together at lunch and sharing common views that makes us Europeans, not talks of big politicians. That might help, but it cannot exclusively remain at that level of high politics.